Welcome. I'm Nick Edgar.
And I'm Jess Frost.
And we are the co-founders of the 3E Space. This is our podcast. Have you got space for this?
An unscripted and unplanned podcast dedicated to curious, messy, and imperfect conversations about the human experience.
Each week we will pick a topic at random that you, the audience, has said, I'd love to see Jess and Nick explore this topic. So without further ado, grab yourself a cuppa, let's explore, get energised and feel empowered together.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Hello, welcome back to the Have You Got Space for This poddy.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. I'm going to jump right in. How the devil are you?
So how am I? I am feeling in the midst of December. Like it's that mid-December. What I've noticed since I've been a coach and a business owner is the work is never done. Like it's so much harder to try and get that clean break. And it's not quite on the horizon yet. There's a lot I want to get done before kind of, really hopefully switching off for a little bit. So that brings with it a little bit of nervousness and anxiety. But as long as it's not howling with one of the seemingly weekly storms that we're encountering in the UK at the moment, it's actually been rather beautiful. Like the cold, the crispness, the cold. There's been a few days where the sun's just been bright in the sky, and that's really uplifting. And yes, I'm a bit of a mixture of everything, I would say.
Love that.
How about you?
Yeah, it's been a really, in terms of today, it's been a really great morning. I have these dopamine rushes. I have these bursts of energy that I have to really lean into. So I've had a really productive morning on many levels, but also had to set quite a tricky boundary with someone who was trying to pull me back into some very old behaviours and dynamics. And I describe it sometimes like when you're growing and you're making all these changes and you're realising who you are and what you need and then how to go out and ask for it. With people from your past that have known you for a very long time. It's not just a quick, let's sit down. This is who I am now. This is what I need from you. And it's all going to be rosy from there. It's having to keep coming back to the same conversations, keep revisiting these boundaries, keep resetting where the lines are. And I describe it sometimes as 11 in Stranger Things. I don't know if there's any Stranger Things fans, but sometimes when you have to set these boundaries, it's and then just collapse. So that's how it feels a bit today. I feel really energized and really positive, and similar to yourself, it's balancing that end of year chaos as a business owner, but also having to deal with the real life shit.
Yeah.
Alongside everything, alongside Christmas that I've explained before can feel quite activating for me. We've got some new stuff that's really tricky in our lives that are still happening, still there. And I shared with you, didn't I, that you were out working and I was on my own. And I have days like this. I don't know if anyone else does, but full disclosure, I have days where I cannot be with myself. I'll describe it as acid running through my veins, uncomfortable, having to be with myself and my emotions and all of that. And when it comes to my menstrual cycle, I don't know if it's PMDD, but really loud, critical, horrendous voices. So I took myself out for a walk, and it was so interesting to reflect on the walk and what was coming up for me, because I decided to go down one of the posh roads, I call it, near us, where they've got these big family houses, we're child free. We've got these big family houses, and they all almost compete with their decorations.
But what they actually do is they have an advent calendar on the street, and there's got to be a proper WhatsApp group, organisation going on here. So on the 1st of December, one of the houses is showing a number 1. Then on the 2nd, you get to see which house is number 2, etc., etc., etc.
They go full in.
They do go full in.
Full in.
Competitive neighbours, I think, but I'm being judgy.
I know, I'm being really judgy. I'm presuming there.
But our inner child, they love it.
And my inner child was I want to go walk near the posh houses to look at the decorations. And 1 minute I was you know, just normally walking as an adult down the street. Next minute, I was having absolute arguments in my head, getting really fucking bent out of shape. Next minute, waves of grief and sadness would hit. So I'd look into these windows and like, oh my God, so many parts of me were just feeling so much grief and so much sadness. And I was like, a few people were driving by and I bet they were like, what the fuck is she okay? Like proper tears. Then the next minute, my inner child was like, oh, pretty, lights, oh. And it was just this like shift from each of these different states. And actually when I got home, I just smiled and laughed and was like, I needed to get out, obviously, and lots of different parts of me needed to experience that. But that's how what it's felt like.
Yeah.
It's like really pockets of like absolute joy and glimmers and productivity and successes. And then also grief, hormones, sadness, anger, rage. So it's a mixed bag I'm bringing to the table today.
But look, that's why we talk about emotional agility and riding the waves, because it's very rare that we are in one nicely packaged little piece of our emotional spectrum. We're just not, for all sorts of reasons. So, in fact, I think we've probably covered about 3 episode topics there, but why don't we actually look at today's episode? But that was a great check-in, man. It's your turn to choose, isn't it? From, how are we going to say it today?
No, we've peaked. Fuck it, let's go straight in.
Bowl of curiosity. What have we got?
Inner Critic.
Wow, thank you, Nichola.
Thank you, Nichola. Hello, Inner Critic.
Wow, that is...
I know you so well.
Mate, honestly.
How's your critic today?
Today, actually, pretty satisfied, pretty okay. Had a great one-to-one session just before we arrived here. Woke up without having to have an alarm before that, which is always good for my nervous system, just waking up naturally. Good breakfast. So my critical voice, I mean, there's not just one. I think we mentioned it on early.
Yeah.
Fergie's the go-to one, the real shouty, like aggressive part of my inner critic. But the critic is easy to be silenced and quiet. Well, not silent, I don't think it's ever silenced, but it's quieter when it sees and witnesses that I'm doing the things that, all things being equal, are the things I need to be doing. Like it's a lot easier to live with. But this is such a big topic. I don't even know where to really start with it. What about you?
Yeah, and there'll be some people maybe listening to this that have never even heard this term.
Great place to start.
I mean, in the self-development space, it tends to be what people kind of speak to, whether it's the inner critic or like the imposter syndrome and things like that. But I think Fergie's a good example of describing it, of like sometimes it's just a pretty cruel voice. Yeah. It picks you apart. It's never good enough.
Very judgy.
Very judgy. And I do believe that these parts of us are formed quite early on in our lives, and believe it or not, are there to kind of protect us, and then they think they're trying to improve us. I think one of the most beautiful things about the work is being able to almost identify these parts of us and these voices that go unnoticed for so many years for some people and have such a dramatic impact on how you show up in the world and how you perform and how you are. A lot of the people that we work with that do have quite loud inner critics are perfectionists and just put so much pressure on themselves. And I think if you've grown up in an environment where you have seen a lot of criticism, you know, people will have grown up in environments where it's quite outwardly, quite openly critical about whether it's your work and the grades you get, whether it's how you look, how you speak. You might have experienced a lot of criticism. And I think we tend to go one of two ways with this, that we can almost model that behaviour ourselves in adulthood. So become that critical person, that critical partner, that critical parent, and it goes outward again. But I think for a lot of people, that gets channeled inwards. And it's like it becomes about them. It becomes about you. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes complete sense. And even the word criticism, it's hard to feel anything positive in my body when I say the word criticism.
Yeah.
But yet, and this is the thing about language in general, very often the same word can mean different things. The way I've understood criticism to be is an objective assessment of performance in one way, shape or form. That's certainly what I grew up with. It definitely, on the elite pathway to football, that's how I understood it.
Yeah.
It's how I understood that kind of judgment at school. I felt the same at home, in the church. So very much a kind of walking a path if I felt comfortable and I was in a good place, but sometimes a tightrope between success and failure as a person. So the critical voice for me started, I would say, in and around adolescence, when you start to become much more self-aware of everything around you. You're changing and growing. You're becoming more your own person in the world. You're starting to develop your own values, which are often very much at odds with those that have been given to you. But I think as I got older and into adulthood in my 20s, that voice definitely became almost a reflection of the impossible high standards that I had set for myself because of what I'd made my upbringing mean. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes that voice would drive me to succeed. So I don't tend to think of it as purely good or bad. But what I do remember for long periods of my life, I just believed it.
Yeah.
Whatever it said to me, I didn't distance myself from it in any way, shape or form. It was part of who I am. And because there was such an emotional weight attached to it, I felt it deeply. And that I gave it much more credence because I didn't think I had a choice. I just thought, this is what my inner dialogue is saying. Therefore, it must be true because I can't convince it otherwise.
Yeah.
I can't argue with it. I can't ignore it. I can't debate it. I can't run away. I can't do anything other than just soak it up and believe it. That's definitely what my lived experience was like for a long, long time.
Yeah. How much of a relief was it when you finally, can you remember like the first time that you realised that the critic was separate to you?
Well, I think that happened to me in a therapy room.
Yeah.
And it was towards the more advanced stage of my therapeutic journey. In as much as I began to understand that psychologically speaking, there are different parts of us, that we all have an inner child, that we all have inner critical voices, that we all have an ego, that we all have a conscious mind, a subconscious and an unconscious mind. So it was kind of it was something that I first understood cognitively, like from a knowledge perspective, and then eventually started to regain some power over how my inner dialogue, how I experienced myself is the way I would describe it, actually, how I experienced myself. Yeah. I started to realise that actually I have some choice over that. I'm not just passively accepting that what's going on here and in here is right. And some of I think some of my most challenging times were because I didn't realise I had any power.
Yeah.
I'd given my power away without even knowing that's what I'd ever done. So I would describe it.
Powerful man.
How about you?
I think I first became aware that my critical voice was separate to me properly, I think, in lockdown. I think before then, it had full control over the wheel. And I always ask myself and my clients this, because we do a lot of work around burnout prevention and things like that. Like that point in my life, I was seeing like repeated patterns of burnout and real highs of energy and real lows, and asking the question, like, what parts of me drive me to that? The critics played a big part. I think of actually like my burnout, but my success in sales.
Yeah.
And I think this is where harnessing and building a relationship with these parts of us, like the perfectionist that we spoke about, last time, it really is about understanding, okay, this is trying to do something for me. Let's spend some time with it. Let's listen to it, but let's not let it drive the bus. Where can it add value to my life? Where is it not going to add value? And I think accepting, like a radical acceptance for me, who's experienced complex trauma, that there are parts of me that are going to be very loud. And like you say, we're not getting rid of them. They're not going to go away miraculously, despite what some people might shout on socials. That's a big part of me. And I need to have radical acceptance that it's part and parcel of my daily life. Even when you were speaking, mine was barking up like, oh God, you've got brain fog today. You're going to fuck this up.
Yeah.
Like, and just noticing and catching the thoughts and catching it. I can lean more into compassion. As a woman, I find it harder around my cycles.
Yeah.
And, I mentioned PMDD. I'm going to put some stuff in the show notes, and I would love to say I could remember what it means, the PMDD. But I will put some stuff in the show notes because I'm not properly diagnosed or anything, but I do really struggle on the run up to my bleed. And my critical voice gets so loud. And I'll ask you the same question if you feel comfortable to answer it, but my critical voice says a lot of things around you're broken. Like you are just broken. Like no one really likes you. Everyone's going to catch you out. And it can get really dark. When I think about my most darkest times and my most depressed times, and when I had my, breakdown in 2017, like that voice could have ended things for me.
Yeah.
So it has so much power. But I think this is like the awareness piece has gifted me so much space and so much more compassion and so much more ability to detach that self within me that isn't broken, that's loved to its core. Like I get more of that. Like I think everyone's inner critic's going to be so different in terms of the stuff they focus on. Mine's like my core self that it goes for. It's like, I'm fucking going to take you down. But what does your voice say, if you feel comfortable to share?
Oh, it's usually tied up with worth. So it will be, you're worthless, you fucked up, you got it wrong, you're not good enough. Who do you think you are?
Yeah.
That kind of dialogue. But here's the thing, and this is the biggest shift for me. When I became able, and I'm arguably still learning this, but when I became able to channel in response to the critical voice when I notice it, curiosity and compassion, because of what I understand that voice to be now that I didn't then, which I'll explain in a second, everything shifts. So for me, understanding I don't have to believe that voice because actually it's not true. But if I get curious about that voice and say, let's not take it at face value. Let's not listen to the actual words it's saying and derive a meaning from that about ourselves. Let's, with curiosity, ask it, why are you showing up right now? What am I doing in my life right now that has prompted that voice to come to the surface and feel the need to be heard? Why? And not always, but so much of the time, it's when I am intending to do something that takes me out of my comfort zone.
The big leap.
Whatever that might be. And that doesn't have to be as a coach.
No.
That for me can be, especially as a 50-year-old, but actually for most of my adult life, going into a busy bar. I always found overwhelming as a highly sensitive person, overwhelming. because I'm audio focused. It's too loud. There's too much going on. I feel unsafe. That's the word. I feel unsafe. So that voice shows up for me and tells me I'm not good enough to do the thing that I want to do, even if I know I'm good enough. Even if it's something that I've done loads of times before, if there's an element of fear attached to it, even the possibility of fear, it's going to show up because it doesn't want me to do the thing, because it wants to keep me where I am, which is safe. Now, if I think of parts of me that their intention is to keep me safe, I find it much easier then to feel compassion towards it, because actually it's got my back.
Yes.
It's got my back. It may not be helping me, but its intention is positive and good. Now, that for me is a game changer. That's an absolute game changer.
Yeah.
Because as soon as that voice comes in now, I don't believe it. I don't have a reaction to what it's telling me that makes me even more afraid. I've actually learned to move towards it and ask myself, okay, what am I afraid of? What are you afraid of? And let's carry ourselves through it. And this is why self-leadership is the phrase that I have as coaches now, because and emotional agility, because those two key skills are what allows you to move through these challenges rather than away from them.
Yeah.
And this is speaking to someone for 2 decades that moved away from these challenges because he believed it. And that's one of the things that I'm most passionate about. And I'm glad that this topic's come up, because it offers so on so many levels the opportunity for change, inwardly and outwardly, if you can take that leap of faith to just stop believing what it says, which, by the way, is not an easy process. But I think the premise of it is quite simple.
I think it's a really good, bearing in mind like the time of year, and some people do really love kind of resetting at New Year. Excuse me. And I think what you've just said there about like noticing the things that maybe you're not doing because it's out of the comfort zone, I think it's a really nice practice exercise to do, to look at this year or look at many years and think, what are the things I'm not doing? And could my critic have been playing a big part in that?
Yeah.
How do I delve a little deeper into what those fears might be? And then how do I find ways to move through it
Yes.
next year? And that's why, you know, I think you've referenced Gay Hendricks' book, The Big Leap. That really was, you know, and this was before kind of we became business owners, but that was such a key book for me of thinking about me behaving in a new way after being conditioned for so long.
Yeah.
Changes out of the comfort zone is literally like, oh, I'm going to say no to that person who's offered to do something, and actually I don't want to people please, so I'm going to say no. That's getting out the comfort zone. But each time we do it, they describe it as that glass ceiling, don't they? And we meet so many of those glass ceilings that we have to break through to get to that next level, as it were, but expect fully that that critic and that perfectionist and that people pleaser and all of that is going to come right up to the surface.
Exactly. I really love that. And also, what I really love about that is that, again, just to reinforce, these are all parts of us that in their own way are trying to look after us. And they're employing these strategies that, as far as they're concerned, have worked for a long time. But they don't understand the person that you are now and who you actually want to be. So for me, the work around this isn't when you're on the edge of that diving board about to dive in, hoping that somehow you're going to be able to show curiosity and compassion out the blue for these parts and power on through. That's not what I'm talking about here anyway. And a lot of the work I do with my clients now is about, it starts really simply. Think of the things that light you up that you'd love to do in your life. Oh, well, I'd love to run a marathon. As I just said it then, that critical voice comes out and goes, you'll never run a marathon.
You die.
No, but it will. It will come out of all of that because it feels that part of me feels unsafe. Yeah. So, but I can work on that if it's important enough for me to want to bring that into my life by just doing what I just did. Okay, here's what I want to do. Here's what lights me up. for a second before I actually contemplate really doing it. And the minute I contemplate really doing it, it's terrifying.
What do you want to do? Tell me 2 things.
2 things I want to do. Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Because we can hold you to account. I'll say to you as well.
I would love to be able to swim, because I can't really swim. And I have a part that tells me I will never be able to swim, that I can't do it, that I've got a lead arse or some kind of physiological defect, because I've tried so many times and failed. Like, so there's definitely that. And I think also probably I've got more creative music in me. That's something I have done before. That was a big part of my life for 4 or 5 years. I released a full album, had an EP out this year, which is the first thing I did in 15 years. That's something that deep down I know that creative expression is really important to me. But the critical voice this time shows up slightly differently, because it says, like, how much effort was that last time? How much did it take out of you last time? Will you be able to create anything that's better than what you've already created? All of that. So those are the 2 things. Probably off the top of my head, that completely took me. I wasn't expecting you to say that.
I love that.
What about you? I'm going to throw that back at you.
It's funny. It's funny. The first 2 things that came up were professional.
Okay.
And then what hit me was like a wave of sadness that it's always work. And my parts loved hearing you talk about non-work stuff.
Yeah.
So the 2 things that came up, like, you know, I have aspirations of writing a book. I have aspirations of speaking on big stages.
Yeah.
Both those 2 things, my critics come up and go, fuck off.
Yeah.
Even like when I've recently put in some speaking applications for this year, and it's like my parts have just written it off.
Yeah.
They're preparing, and I can feel my stomach clench for that email to say, or just tumbleweed of like, no.
Yeah.
So like, there's definitely some kind of professional aspirations, but I think if I was to be honest with myself, and I can even feel like some emotion here coming up, is the things I want to do involve my body.
Yeah.
And full-bodied expression. And I think parts of me have clung on to tomboy. And I think there's parts of me that like really want to embrace, like, I don't know, I see some girls where they're going to do those like pole dancing classes, or women that they just strip naked and they get covered in paint and art, and then they go on a runway. Like, that's the real me aspirations, I think. Like, the work stuff's really important, and I have vision and goals in terms of that, and the book and speaking is really important to me. But yeah, thank you for your share first, because I think I would have just stayed completely professional. But I think there's the real out of the comfort zone is fully embodied self expression and like femininity, and like a photo shoot in my undies. Do you know what I mean?
No, mate, look, I love that. And it's great to hear you talk about it, because I know this is a really important part of your ongoing journey.
Well, it is for a lot of women, I think. You know, I grew up around the freaking horrendous 90s beauty standards, noughties beauty standards bullshit, where, you know, it was about going to Weight Watchers when you were underage, and kind of getting on the scales every day, and being so obsessed with calories and what you look like. And, you know, every magazine cover, it was about shaming people's bodies. So I think that many women and men, everyone, you know, will have those critical parts about their physical
for sure, I do.
body. And I worked very, very hard over, you know, the last 10 years with it, but it's an ongoing process. So there's almost like a 90s noughties like magazine magazine editor in my head.
Residue.
Oh God, just some of this stuff. But so that, I think if I think about that critical side of me, that would be really out of the comfort zone of not doing that, not having to lose weight. Because I've caught myself even looking back at some of the footage of the podcast, and I've gone, you're so, like, that voice, I know you said my voice is going, God, you're so fat, oh my God, you're double chin, oh my God, make sure you put a cushion over your belly. And that for me is the comfort zone of like,
That's
just
probably
being
why
with-
I've got one here. Like, I've consciously.
No,
like,
but we do. We have these like
Yeah,
little
yeah,
security blankets, and you know, rightfully so. But then the next level for me is thinking, now, how do I be more okay and more loving with that?
I love that, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because when we were talking about in the Critic earlier, and we were talking about, you know, these may be influences that we've had while we've been growing up. They're not just face-to-face influences. They're societal influences.
Cultural,
they're
yeah.
media, cultural. Like, there's all sorts of influences which will affect how we feel about ourselves, because it sows the seed that in order to be lovable, acceptable, happy, any one of a number of other adjectives you could attach to that, I must be this, 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 and this, and I can't be that, 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 and that. And I think that's why part of me, when I think about coaching and I think about wellness and I think about who do I want to be in the world and who do I want everybody to be in the world, I want everybody to have the privilege and the freedom to discover what that is.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of opinions about the use of things like masculine and feminine energy for these reasons, because while I think they can be helpful, I think they're also very stereotypical, and I don't believe that they're necessarily innate, because I think they're largely societal. So I think there's something here about polarizing things in that way can be helpful. It can be. And if it's helpful to you, great. But for me, I find it unhelpful.
Yeah.
And actually, there are parts of me that are really passionate about, if we want to be a more open and less binary and traditional role focused, and to really have liberty and freedom to be who we are, whatever that is, then we have to have environments created for us when we're young people to allow us to explore that. And I don't think it's something that we do and then it finishes when we get to adulthood. I think it's part of the human experience. And when I feel I have the freedom to explore who I am, what I like, who I like, and to kind of meet other people with curiosity about all of that critical voice just calms the fuck down, because my boundaries of safety just extend so far. They've got nothing to say. They're like, go for it. I'm going to sit over here and have a fag. I don't know why I've got a vision of my inner critic. They're like having a crafty fag, because it's like, yeah, he's all right. He's all right. He's all right. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely would.
Like,
Definitely would.
do you know what I mean? So I think but I think often to create those boundaries of safety where we feel we can be completely free and safe, it's actually about closing ourselves off to an awful lot. So I think for me that's a big part of what I continue to be curious about in relation to my inner critic.
Yeah.
I want to extend the boundaries of where I feel safe, but I
Yeah.
can only do that by stepping into these arenas and moving through that perceived lack of safety.
Yeah.
Otherwise, those, what do they call it in NLP? Like, my map of the world just stays where it is.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of us, that's what happens. The map of our world gets given to us at every level, and we just accept it.
I think you're right. I think that journey back to self has so many ripple effects on so many different areas. But yeah, if I'm thinking about, we touched on this as well, about when you have so much outside influence, which has capitalist gains, and of course we've got all these standards and these things to reach because we're being sold to, and you know, all that kind of stuff, and we're being controlled. The more we can go inwards and, like you say, find out who the hell we are, what the hell do we believe, what's important to us, and I'm going to actually have that as the foundation of that path that I walk on. We are less controlled, we're less influenced, we're less manipulated.
It's tricky, like, as with all of these topics.
Yeah.
And this is why curiosity is such a beautiful word, because there's never a moment of flag in the ground. This part of this exploration has ended.
Yeah.
Like, it is ongoing. I have the right to be wrong.
Yeah.
which God knows I often am.
But no, be brave to be wrong.
Yeah, exactly. It's daring. I think it's daring to be different, daring to be you.
Yeah.
That's really, without wanting to plagiarise Brenny, like,
Dare greatly.
but
Go.
yeah, just, I don't know. But when we do that, because very often there's always that voice inside us calling us, it's calling us to that. It's reminding us, it's tapping away, going like, come on, there's something here that's there for you if you pay attention to it. I think we all have that voice. Yeah. But the very minute we do pay attention to it is when our inner critic likely to be at its loudest. That's the paradox.
Yeah. But no, shine a light on it.
Definitely.
Shine a light, keep exploring, keep getting curious, go inwards. All of those answers are right in there.
Absolutely. And just don't take it at face value.
Yeah.
Don't take the things that you say to yourself that are cruel at face value.
Yeah.
And try and find people and spaces where you can openly share your experience, because chances are people have got very similar experiences to you, and you can empower yourself and each other by doing that. That's where the community aspect of these conversations is really important.
That vulnerability, it just everyone else's shares can shine a light on our own inner world, can't it? And I think, just asking ourselves to kind of wrap this episode up is, when we are feeling a bit stuck, maybe you are feeling a bit stagnant, you're not doing certain things, there's opportunities, or maybe something you really want to do, like, who might be playing a part in keeping you there.
Love that.
Love that, mate. Thank you for this, Nichola. Love this convo.
Till the next time.
Till the next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening or watching this week's episode of Have You Got Space for This? If you're liking what you're hearing and seeing, please subscribe, rate, or review the podcast so we can reach as many people around the world.
And if you're not already connected with us and are aware of everything we do at the 3E Space, in the show notes you will see all of our handles and ways to get in touch with us, which we'd really love you to do. Get connected with us, give us your feedback on this and any other episodes you listen to, and also topics. Keep giving us topics and stay connected. So until next time, thanks for being here.